I'm honestly nervous to do this video because it's about Lydia and everybody is so split. Everyone's looking at it black or white and I'm dead center in the middle. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm going to be breaking down my perspective on Lydia from Love is Blind Season 5. If you're curious, stay tuned. One thing that was fun to see this season is that they had cards, questions, games in the pods. And I think that's so important and critical for couples to continue getting to know each other. And that's why I'm happy to talk about today's sponsor, which is the Paired app. The Paired app is an app that utilizes quizzes, games, questions to help you and your partner connect more and build more happiness in your relationship. This is an app that was recommended to me by a friend over a year ago. And my husband and I just had the best time learning more about each other. It showed opportunities for improvement with things like conflict resolution, and it also just had fun things for us to talk about and think about. They have a ton of categories, so home life, fun and entertainment, conflict, sex and intimacy, and they have so many different ways for you to explore those things with your partner. Our favorite thing was to do quizzes and see how well we knew each other. We've been together now for over 13 years, so it's nice to know that there is still so much to learn, and there was nothing more fun for us than to get that notification that one of us started a quiz. So if you're interested in trying out the Paired app for yourself, I highly recommend that you do. You can get a 7-day free trial by using the link below and 25% off of a premium membership. Thanks again to Paired. Now back to the video. Now, you all have asked me to do more individual analyses, so that's what I'm doing. I've already done a video on Milton, so of course I talked a little bit about Lydia there. Today I'm going to be talking just about Lydia, and there will be other videos where I'm going to be breaking down like the Uche and Aaliyah dynamic, and of course I'll have to talk about Lydia a little bit in that video as well. But this video, for the most part, will be my perspective on Lydia throughout all of these different contexts. First disclaimer is that there will be spoilers. If you're not sure about who ends up together, who's still together, then definitely don't watch this video until you're all cut up and come back. Secondly, remember, I am none of these people's therapist. Not only that, I have never even had a conversation with anyone in the cast or their families. So everything that I'm basing my analysis on are the things that we saw on screen. This is not a true reflection of who these people are because things are often included or taken out based on what makes the best sense for the narrative that the producers want to get across on screen. There's so much Love is Blind content now, so many interviews. I can't even really keep up with what everyone is posting and the interviews. So if I'm giving information that might be a little bit behind, just give me some grace. You can educate people in the comments. Most importantly, I'm just using this as a way for you all to see any dynamics that may be familiar to you so that you can work on those things or celebrate them if you're already doing well in these areas. It's most important to me that we can just use this as a springboard for improving our own relationships. So the first thing with Lydia, I said it in the Milton video, the first note I ever took was on the date that she and Milton had. I thought that that date was so memorable. I thought it was so cute that they both love rocks and have this geology connection.
I'm a geologist.
Oh my God, I'm really big into metamorphic rock.
The thing about Lydia being older than Milton really wasn't something I was worried about right off the bat. I knew that we would see if they were to continue, if it was going to impact their relationship or not. So I was hoping that they would still give each other a chance because I just thought, how often do you meet someone else that's interested in geology at that level? Even though one of them is a geologist and the other is an engineer, I just thought that that was such a cute thing for them to bond on. So that was the first note I ever took for the show. Then the next notable thing for me happened with Lydia when she was pouring her heart out to Izzy. It was so interesting to see such a strong reaction from Lydia about their connection, where on the other end, I just wasn't feeling the same from Izzy. Now, keep in mind that a lot of times there are dates that happen that we don't see at all. And so maybe there were some dates that would give Lydia a basis for her belief that they had a strong connection. I think she may have believed that she was one of his top picks. But to me, on the outside, it seemed obvious that that was not the case.
It's so weird because I want to feel you.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we have the added advantage of seeing body language, whereas remember, when they have that wall, you can't necessarily see that. Maybe if Lydia could see Izzy's body language, she would more easily be able to tell that he wasn't as interested in her as she was in him. But from that moment, I started thinking Lydia probably latches on to people really quickly with very little foundation for the attachment. And we do see that a lot of times with people who are anxiously attached, is that they don't need a lot of history with the person or even a lot of commonalities with the person to recognize them as someone that they want to latch onto. And the idea of that person not wanting them in the same way can actually cause them to cling more. We often see the dynamic where you have a person with an anxious attachment bonding or attracted to a person with an avoidant attachment and vice versa. And a person with an avoidant attachment is the person that needs a lot of space. I wouldn't describe Izzy as having an avoidant attachment based on what we saw later in the show, but I did feel that Lydia was showing some signs of an anxious attachment, and I was just paying attention to see if that was going to progress during the show or if that was just an incorrect assumption based on my earliest perceptions of her. Before we even get to their breakup in episode 1, seeing Lydia interact with Izzy that way really reminded me of how we often trick ourselves into missing red flags or missing obvious cues from people when we want something to be true. So Lydia wanted Izzy to be her person. She wanted to be his number one just as he was her number one. So she was ignoring times where he may not have been as responsive or times where he was giving lukewarm responses when she would declare her feelings for him.
You're my number one.
Oh, wow, that's flat. Thank you.
Because I know, like, we have a lot in common. Do you feel the same way?
Uh-huh.
We ignore those things when we get so committed to a fantasy or future with someone that really may not be in the cards. And I see this all the time with clients, with friends, myself. I've seen it where it's so much easier to accept what you want to be true than to try to be as objective as you can and observe what's actually happening. And one exercise you can try to do in situations like that is to try to look at the situation as if it was something happening to someone that you love. So you look at it and you say, okay, if my best friend were to tell me that the guy she's been calling doesn't get back to her until the next day, that when she texts him, a lot of times it looks like her messages aren't delivered, or she only talks to him during the weekdays but never hears from him on the weekends, what would you say in that situation? Sometimes it's easier for us to look at it as a third person instead of being in the situation, because unfortunately we all have blinders in our own personal situations. But if you can take yourself out of it for a second and imagine that it's happening to someone else, literally write out the behaviors, the good behaviors you're seeing and the negative behaviors that you're seeing. And what do you see the most of and what feels the most pressing to you emotionally? Some things we can deal with and some things should be deal breakers. And so Lydia just reminded me of a lot of clients that I work with who can ignore red flags because they don't want the things that they're seeing to be true, and so they convince themselves that they're not. One way that we could see in that interaction that Lydia was trying to curate a very specific truth that she wanted was her talking over Izzy.
So yeah, that's kind of how I am. Very affectionate.
Oh my God, we're the same.
Sometimes when we have the intuition that's telling us that someone's going to say something that we don't want to hear or do something that we don't want them to do, any sort of confirmation that we're about to be rejected or abandoned or criticized, a lot of times we don't give them the opportunity to do that. It's like if you know you're going to get bad news and all you have to do is call in to get the bad news and you put that call off for as long as you can. That happens sometimes in our daily interactions with people that we love and care about. So caution yourself. If you're actively preventing someone from really showing you all of their self, ask yourself why and be honest with yourself about what your worst fear is about what they may reveal to you if you do give them the opportunity to completely show you who they are. So then when we fast forward to Izzy actually breaking up with Lydia and she's like, it doesn't make any sense. It did make sense. If you were watching it, it absolutely made sense and it added up based on what we saw again with the edited show. It did make sense, but she didn't want these things to be true. So you fill in the blanks with what you want a person to be saying or doing instead of paying attention to what they actually are doing. So then you're dumbfounded when it doesn't go the way you want it to go, when a person watching objectively could have told you that way before. Now, the other moment for Lydia in episode 1 that stands out is when Aaliyah and Uche have that moment where Uche criticizes Aaliyah for her past with cheating and how she dealt with cheating. And Lydia keeps telling Aaliyah, look at me, you're just like me. I remember feeling very uncomfortable, and I've talked on my videos before about countertransference, which is basically the therapist paying attention to how a client makes them feel. And the discomfort I felt when Lydia kept telling Aaliyah to look at her and to know that they're just alike, she's just like her, is something felt off. It felt like I couldn't tell if she was trying to make Aaliyah just feel at ease and know, hey, this is normal, I've been in your shoes before, or if she was making the moment about herself. You know, it just seemed like she was saying, you're just like me, and that's okay. A lot of the things that she was saying were really good. Like, I loved when she was saying, hey, the stuff he's saying has everything to do with him and not to do with you. I was like, that is great advice. But it was interspersed with odd comments that were a little bit disturbing to me. I just didn't know, why are you saying this in this moment, right? And so again, not knowing what conversations they may have had off camera that would make these conversations make more sense, but just based on what we saw, I remember feeling really uncomfortable looking at Lydia command Aaliyah to look at her and pay attention to her, unless she was trying to just help Aaliyah ground herself. Some grounding techniques do require you to focus in on a specific person or specific thing so that you can calm down, get out of your head, be very aware of the space, and be in the present moment. Maybe that's what Lydia was trying to do. She was trying to help ground Aaliyah maybe in a way, but it just felt off. And then when we ended up finding out the information later on, I looked at that scene completely differently, and I was just wondering if Lydia was using that as an opportunity to find out what was going on with Uche, and if she was trying to build a relationship with one of his strongest connections to keep tabs on him. Because we did find out that Lydia, you know, she seemed to be attuned to Uche. She even said that she recognized him based on his breathing before he even spoke. Yet it seemed as though when she was speaking, he didn't recognize her voice, which Lydia has a very distinctive voice.
You're a lawyer, have a business.
Who am I speaking with?
Really, Uche, you don't know who I am.
He may have been being dishonest about that. That's a very real possibility. But when I first saw it, my first reaction was, dang, she was not as significant to him as she's thinking that she is, because she's like, you really don't recognize my voice. So I don't really know what the truth is there, and we really never will, because they're both giving different perspectives. And this is something that happens in couples therapy, especially a lot. You can be in a session where you have two people telling you completely different things with such conviction. And you have to get to the point, if those people are together, where we agree neither one of you are going to see the other person's version of the story as the truth. And we don't have cameras following you 24/7. And we don't know what your intentions were in your mind as you were saying and doing certain things. So we have to let go of the details of these incidents and who did what first, etc., and move forward if that's what you're wanting to do. A situation like this is tricky because they aren't together. So what are we working toward by trying to say one truth and another truth, other than at this point them being in the public eye and both of them trying to sort of save their reputation in a way? So I don't know if Uche knew Lydia was there, if Lydia knew Uche was there. I'll talk a little bit more about my initial thoughts about that a little bit later in the video, but all I can say is that in this moment with Aaliyah, when Lydia's telling her to look at her, I really, looking back, I could not tell if that was sort of a tactic for her to learn more about what was happening with Uche. If you knew somebody in the pods, whether they are in the girls' lounge with you or somebody you could have potentially been dating, there's going to be a nosy part that wants to know what's happening with them regardless, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that she's in love with him because of that, but I did think it was rather convenient that she developed such a close relationship with Uche's top connection. So I already talked about this in the video about Milton, so I don't want to rehash it too much, but I do have to, of course, talk about the date between Lydia and Milton, where she's opening up to him about how hurt she is about Izzy ending things with her. Now, I talked about it from Milton's perspective, but from Lydia's side, I really had to applaud her for being so authentic and honest in that moment, because she really was honest with him and letting him know that her heart was broken that day and that she was having a hard time getting through it. And I love the moment she asked him,
Can I talk to you for real?
Yeah, for sure.
like, can I be super honest with you? And he's like, please. Yeah, I think Lydia really showed Milton how to be vulnerable. And I admired that about her so much, that she allowed a moment where she was broken to transform into a moment where she was able to really make a connection with someone else. She admitted to having a hang up regarding Milton's age, which I thought that was good. And she was honest with him, even though he said, you know, you're my number one, I really like you. And he was like, could you see yourself marrying me? She was like, today I can, but yesterday I couldn't. That was real, because we've seen so many times where it seems like people just completely backtrack on what they've been saying before in order to just leave this process with somebody. And I thought that Lydia saying that to Milton was her just being honest that, you know, you really weren't one of my top contenders, honestly. And now after this conversation, you are. She challenged him. She said, I've been open with you and you haven't been open with me. He admitted to that. You know, this was, I think, such a defining moment for Lydia and Milton, because he saw he was going to have to step it up emotionally in order to be with her. And she saw that she was going to have to let go of her preconceived notions around age. She recognized and she promised him, I'm not going to allow your age to prevent me from seeing a future with you. And she did stand by that promise. So that was one of those moments where, you know, I got to see a different side of Lydia, where she definitely did seem like she was trying to be as authentic as she possibly could to have the highest chance at building an authentic connection. And I'll be honest, whenever we see people lose their number one and the next person that they go for is always a worry for me, because I never know, is this just a rebound or is this just an attempt to stay on the show? You never really know. And so I thought that Lydia being open to Milton, both I applauded it and I also made sure I kept my eyes wide open, because I didn't want it to turn into Lydia just trying to make it work with just anybody who was showing her interest. Now, before the reveal about Lydia and Uche's past, which we don't see until the end of episode 3, I just thought that Lydia didn't like Uche because of how he treated Aaliyah about the cheating thing early on. So I was making notes like, wow, look at Lydia's body language as Aaliyah is telling about their relationship. You could tell Lydia just does not like him. And she's like, oh, wow, he told you that, you know. And I was looking at it like that because, you know, we all are that friend at times where you're like, oh my gosh, this person is terrible. You're ignoring a red flag, but I'm your friend and I have to trust your judgment. And when you're with them, I'm with them. And when you're not, I'm not. I am the friend that's usually going to tell you my first impression. And then after that, I'm not going to like be bashing the person that you're with, because all you end up doing at that point is creating a wedge in your friendship. Because if they want to continue being with that person, what's it really got to do with you? You know what I mean? It's like you are willing to sacrifice this relationship so that you can keep saying how bad the person they want to be with is. I'm just not that person. I'll just tell you what I think up front. You can do with that information whatever you want. If you ask for my opinion, like, do you think that's toxic? I will tell you. But outside of that, I'm not going to be like trying to be in your face and just tell you all the time about how bad the relationship is, because if it's really that bad, you will come to the conclusion on your own, or other things will happen where you're asking what we think about it. So I thought that that was what Lydia was doing, which in a way maybe she was. As a friend who has dated this person before, Maybe she just knew that he wasn't a great guy and she just didn't want her to have to go through the same suffering that she did. But the producers asked her and Uche not to tell anybody about their history, which I think was a mistake. In the reunion, they revealed that the producers had specifically told Uche and Lydia not to tell anybody. And so that made a lot more sense because it seems really deceitful not to share, but then they told them to go ahead and tell. And I don't know if really they're saying so that it wouldn't ruin the experiment, but I really think it was for a nice big reveal, like some drama. That's what I would think was the main reason why they told them that. I believe that now learning that, it made more sense why she didn't say anything. But I'm sorry, I still question if she was strategic in some way and ending up, and when I say strategic, do I mean she's got like a whiteboard out and she's like, I'm going to do this to make this? No. But do I think that there was a part of her that was very curious about how the experiment was going for Uche? And she knew that the person he was building the most connections with and talking the most to was Aaliyah, and that bonded her to Aaliyah. I think that there is a high possibility that that happened. A lot of you won't agree with that. I try to look at things from a neutral perspective, and it is difficult because I'm a human being, right? And I come in with my own biases, of course. We all do. But I think that Lydia can both be a great person, a kind person, and also have ulterior motives in certain choices that she makes. Even if they are subconscious, sometimes we don't even realize why we're doing certain things until we sit down on a therapist's couch, for example, and we realize, oh, I probably did that because of XYZ. So when I say strategic, I don't mean she was like doing it intentionally, but I do mean that there may have been an ulterior motive for Lydia developing such a close relationship with Aaliyah, knowing that she had this history with Uche. Now, here's the thing that was really confusing for me when it came to the Lydia Uche reveal, is that they both seem to speak so highly of each other. Now, people always refer to Uche speaking highly of Lydia and then all of a sudden trying to bash her, which I will get to in the Uche video. Trust me, I'm not going to ignore that. But Lydia did the same. It seems like she was talking so highly of him and telling Aaliyah like, oh, he has an amazing house and I've met all his friends and, you know, he's a great guy. Like, she's saying all of these positive things about him.
Oh, his house is dope.
Yeah.
I know his friends. I've gone to a couple of events with his friends.
And really, in a way, kind of claiming her dominance over Aaliyah and how she's known Uche longer than Aaliyah, and word vomiting, just telling her all these things. And Aaliyah's telling her, I don't want to know these things from you. And Lydia just can't help but talk a lot about Uche. I mean, everything she knows about him, his car, his house, his friends, his dogs. You guys, that is not normal, okay? And I do understand that for a lot of you, you need clear villains and victims. And for you, if Uche is the villain, then Lydia and Aaliyah have to be the victims. And I do understand that. It is a much easier narrative to follow. But I think that both of them brought a certain level of toxicity to the pods. And I think Lydia is not exempt from that. I think the relationship she had with Aaliyah became very problematic in terms of boundaries. And I think that, you know, it was hard for her flaunt her knowledge of Uche. That's what she was doing. She's giving Leah all this information about Uche. Now, I do think it was fair that she told Lydia about the fact that she and Uche had slept together so recently.
Last time we saw each other was back in January this year. And we slept together and all that stuff.
Just because, you know, Uche's making it seem like it was distant past and Lydia's saying it wasn't that distant. That is fair because Aaliyah needed to know that Uche wasn't giving her all the information about their story. But things about his car, his friends, his dog, there was no reason why Aaliyah needed to learn that information from Lydia. And I'm curious, you all may have a different perspective as to why she was sharing those things. If you do, or if you don't, I want to know, why do you guys think that Lydia used that moment as an opportunity to share so much about what she knew about Uche? I didn't understand what was her intention in saying those things to her. I just didn't. Okay, you guys, we're gonna have to talk about that moment where Lydia and Uche realize that they're both in the experiment. I want you all to go back and watch that, okay? Because I've been very surprised to hear people's responses about that situation, about Uche, about Lydia. Because what I saw, what it seemed like to me, despite what Lydia says later on, it seems like Uche is the one who wanted to make the definitive decision for them not to continue dating in the pods. First of all, it seems like he has no idea who she is, like I said earlier. I don't know if he was just dating so many people at the time that she's not ringing a bell. He seemed really dumbfounded about who she was. But he first throws out...
I don't know. I don't know if it's a sign or
Right.
if it's...
Is this a sign that we stop, shoot, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, cut the crap. Do you want to start in zero?
Should we start from ground zero? And then he's like, well, no, because it compromises the experiment. She's like,
So you don't think it's even worth it to even get to know each other more?
to me, I took that as she was still wanting to date in the pods and see if they're going to end up together. And he is the one who is shutting that down. That's how it looked to me. Later on, Lydia tells the story as though she is the one who shut it down. That is just not what it looked like to me. And if you guys see the same as me, let me know. And if you see something different, let me know. Please put that in the comments below, because to me, it definitely looked like it was something she would be open to doing, is continuing to date in the pods. Now, I will say I thought it was odd that the first time we ever really saw Uche expressing a visible emotion such as tears, it was over Lydia, about how she's such a great person. All of that to say, I understood. I will get to this in the Uche and Aaliyah video, but I did understand why Aaliyah left, because it did seem like there was some history there between them that had not been fully resolved. It definitely seemed that way based on both of them. They both seemed like they were on the cusp of being able to get over each other, and then being in this experiment maybe brought them both to top of mind, and it didn't seem like they were at all resolved in their relationship. With Uche crying and Lydia word vomiting everything she knows about him, I thought that if I were Aaliyah, I would feel the same. Like, I'm not about to sign up to be engaged to someone who is still emotionally invested in their ex. But then later, Uche says that he was saying all these positive things about Lydia because he didn't want to come across as someone who's just bashing their ex. So that seemed really strategic. I mean, was she a good ex or a bad ex? Like, you know, if you're so focused on image, again, we will get to that in the Uche video, but it kind of makes you question everything you know about Lydia, because we're learning things about these people through what we're seeing with them, but also how other people interact with them and talk about them. In the moment where Uche was saying such positive things about Lydia, I was like, wow, to hear her ex talking so highly of her, that's a great sign. So then for Uche to come back and say that he was just saying these things because he didn't want to seem like he was talking poorly about his ex, that seems strategic, but also problematic and possibly dishonest, because what about the tears? Why are you crying out of concern about her getting hurt? You know, it just didn't make sense. You know, I couldn't tell if Lydia came there with an obsession for Uche, if Uche had an obsession with Lydia, if they were both still obsessed with each other. And I honestly, after all this time, I feel like I still don't have that answer. Even though Lydia ended up with someone at the end, I don't think that's enough to rule out the possibility that maybe she knew Uche was going to be on there. I'm not a detective. I don't know. Now, I did talk about this in the Milton video, of course, but when Lydia tells Milton about her history with Uche, she is laying it on kind of thick. In general, when you share that sort of information, if you have a bombshell to share with your partner, something about your past, something about your present, even if it's like a diagnosis that was unexpected, you want to give this person an opportunity to process. And when they're processing, you can process them processing, but try not to panic, because what happens in those moments, you know, they had the separation of a wall. But in real life, what happens is in a situation like that, your partner needs to process. You end up following them around the room. You keep trying to get them to give you answers. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? No, tell me what you're thinking. And it becomes a very heightened emotional situation whereas had you given them the opportunity to process it on their own, it may have not escalated to the level that it did. Now, this situation is different because, again, they have the wall with the pod, so Lydia doesn't even have the option to follow him when he says that he needs a break. But she does start panicking and melting down, and Stacy comforts her. And the thing that's unfair about this is I was thinking at the time, well, how did you expect him to react to you building this connection with him and not giving him that information? But once we found out the producers told her and Uche they could stay on the show if they didn't tell people, that kind of put everything in a different context. Because maybe, I'm sure with Lydia being the person that we've seen, she really likes to just spill the truth, the whole truth, right? So with her, I think she would have absolutely told Milton earlier about her history with Uche had the producers not told her that she couldn't. I could see her telling him on like one of the first dates, honestly. I don't see that being something that she would keep secret, that there's somebody here that she knows from the past. So I can't hold that against her, and I can't hold it against Milton for feeling bamboozled about the reveal, because I guess she also was not allowed to say, the only reason I hadn't told you already is because the producers asked me not to, as to not compromise the experiment. That would be a totally different conversation, wouldn't it? But the producers have so much influence and they have anonymity, which prevents people from being able to hold them liable or accountable for the choices they make that affect their relationships and even their mental health. So I think this was a situation where we really can't fault either one of them, but it did feel like in the moment before we knew that information, like Lydia was panicking and you could sense the panic. And I think Milton was starting to build a wall to kind of separate himself emotionally from all of this angst and overwhelm. But I'm glad that ultimately he was able to work through that. But Lydia definitely was coaxing him quite heavily to get him to be able to work past that and get to a proposal. I've used the word in the Milton video, strong-armed. That's how it felt to me. It felt like Lydia could see the signs that Milton was starting to change his mind or starting to look at things differently. And she was very worried about being rejected, not just 2 times, but really 3 times if you include the fact that Uche did not want to continue getting to know each other better through the pods. I think Lydia was like, I cannot experience yet another rejection in this process. And I could be wrong. Maybe it was just the fact that it was Milton and she really wanted Milton. But based on what we saw, which is limited, maybe we didn't see all of their dates, I thought she was really laying it on kind of thick, just trying to influence Milton's decision about whether or not he was going to move forward with her. And maybe she was just being very reassuring, like, I want you. I don't want you to question that. I want you. And I think that was part of what she was doing. But I think also was, and I need you to still want me. That's what I was hearing in the subtext. You all may disagree with that, but the pleading stance to me definitely, they gave off a certain desperation. I will say before we work our way out of the pods that Aaliyah and Lydia's friendship was absolutely one of my favorite things to watch on the show. I just loved how they were both emotionally vulnerable and even physically vulnerable, like sharing a blanket, seeing them cuddle. That was just, I'm that way with my closest friends. And so whenever I see that, I just feel at home. It's like a sense of familiarity and comfort. But after everything unfolded, after Aaliyah left, after the way Aaliyah was talking about what she learned regarding Lydia and her beliefs that Lydia knew Uche was going to be there, it just really complicated it. So I honestly can't look at that relationship with the excitement that I had before, because now everything is so skewed and so muddled up that the relationship even between them is in question for me now. Now, when we talk about the situation that happened at the party with They had this party with all these random people there. Some people who did get engaged but were edited out of the show. Other people who didn't get engaged, and I wasn't sure why they were still there. But once we get to this party where Uche is there for some reason, and he is like on a campaign against Lydia, I just didn't understand what his intention was with that. And I'll talk more about it in the video about him. But I thought it was nice of Lydia to sit with him and allow him to talk to her. But then at the point where he started trying to, like, I guess he wanted her to just admit that she was there for him. If that's not her truth, of course she's never going to admit that. And I would argue even if that was her truth at this point with her moving forward with Milton, it wouldn't be smart for her to admit that. I think she would lose the support of the friends that she's made in the cast and possibly be jeopardizing her engagement. So I think the stakes were so high for Lydia that Uche should know that she was never going to admit that she did that, even if she did. And I'm not saying that she did. I'm just saying that I think it was pointless for Uche to corner her about that when the likelihood of her admitting anything was low. What I think about her looking at girls' Instagram stories, that means nothing to me. I'm not gonna lie. That to me is nothing. The thing about social media, if you have a public profile, your profile can be seen by absolutely anyone. So it's not stalking because a person is looking at stories that you're putting out for the public to see. You know, I just don't understand what the big deal was about that. I can understand him being worried about Lydia showing up and knowing he was going to be there. And I do think there are some convincing arguments from Aaliyah especially that would suggest that maybe Lydia did know. I think Lydia recognizing Uche based on how he breathes.
And when I walked in that pod and I was like, he said, like, even his breathing.
Yeah.
He has a peculiar.
Yeah.
I think that was very interesting. I think that her telling castmates that she thinks she's going to run into someone from her past, and I do think that's pretty convenient. So for me, I haven't seen enough evidence of the opposite to say that that's not a possibility at all. But obviously you can't really provide a bunch of evidence that she didn't know. So unfortunately, this is just a claim that will probably forever be unresolved. We can feel strongly one way or another, but my position is just that I believe it could be a possibility, and I'll leave it at that. I'm not feeling strongly one way or another that she did, because again, I was not there. I can't say with 100% certainty what happened. All I can say is I am not close to the possibility that Lydia may have known that Uche was there. And if she did, that is definitely compromising the experiment, and it's not fair to everyone that's supposed to be dating strangers there. There's also the possibility that it was a complete coincidence, because if you're doing everybody from the same city, obviously there's a chance that you're going to run into people that you know. We've actually seen this on Married at First Sight. I think it was Amelia and Bennett. They actually had known each other or seen each other around. They had mutual friends, so they knew of one another. And so, you know, that is what happened with them. But so they did get married. I hope that's not a spoiler. It's a super long time ago in that episode. And I'm sorry if you haven't seen that, but that was a time that we've seen this happen before. So it is definitely a possibility that was a coincidence too. But there's also the possibility that she knew or he knew. And I don't like the idea of us closing our minds to that possibility simply because we like somebody. We see again as Uche is laying into her or talking to other people about her, where Lydia starts panicking again about her connection with Milton. She's like, no, Milton, where's Milton? You know, she's scrambling for him. I wasn't sure if maybe she needed some emotional validation, if she was worried that Uche was talking to him and going to make him look at her differently. I don't know why, but you could just hear the fear in her voice and the anger in her voice as she's saying Milton's name. I think it was sort of also a form of displacement, which is basically we have a strong emotion that we don't appropriately place on the person or situation that's deserving of it. So we displace it onto another person or situation. I don't think she was angry with Milton at all, but I think that the anger she was feeling from that experience with Uche was just seeping through how she was calling out for Milton. I didn't know what was happening in that moment. I'm like, are you looking from him out of being upset, being afraid? But it was very strong. I'm still a little bit unclear as to what the underlying emotion was with how she was looking for him. But ultimately, we did see that once Milton was able to talk with her, he was able to completely calm her down and reassure her, let her know that she's amazing, that this has no bearing on his relationship with her, and that she doesn't have to worry about that. You know, we could just leave, catch our reservation, and leave this situation in the past. A lot of the critical scenes I already go over in the Milton video, so I don't want to rehash too much. So in the reunion, Aaliyah says to Lydia that even off camera, she said something to her that would indicate that she knew that Uche was going to be on the show. And Lydia admits that she and Uche both at least talked about the casting.
We had a conversation of 2 seconds in November of 2021, and oh yeah, I saw the casting. Oh yeah, I did too. And that was it.
So even if Lydia did not know, she says that she never got confirmation that Uche was going to be on the show. She knew that there was a possibility that he would be on the show. And I'm wondering if there was a part of her that hoped that they would have the opportunity to get to know each other better through the pods, as she inquired about when they first were talking to each other in the pods. So my belief, or my experience watching Lydia, I believe that she knew there was a possibility that her ex, that she may have still been interested in pursuing something with, she knew there was a possibility that he would also be on this show. That is my belief, okay? And I don't think that that makes her a bad person, and I don't think that makes Uche a good person or means that Uche was right. I'm just saying that based on the information we have, this is the conclusion that I've come to, which could absolutely be incorrect. Okay, you guys, so overall, I think that when it came to Lydia, she was definitely one of the most interesting people this season. She was involved in a lot of different relationships with different cast members, and you could tell that Lydia has the type of personality where when people are friends with her, they are loyal to her because they know she's loyal to them. She's a very loving person. She's a very affirming person. I would love to see the new dynamic with her and his family, and just watching the process of them evolving as a married couple, I would be interested in. So she was definitely someone to watch this season. She gave us a lot of food for thought. And I think the main thing I learned from her is the importance of not being ashamed of your emotionality. So many of us are ashamed, and we try to override our emotions with logic and reasoning. And sometimes the situation calls for that, but a lot of times we could be using our emotions as a guide for just the best decision for us. She trusts her gut, and I think that's a beautiful thing to witness. So those are my thoughts about Lydia. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I really do appreciate when you guys share your take on things. Really, thank you so much for watching the video and participating. If you're in the live premiere, I love talking with you guys and getting your live reactions. And thanks again to Paired. Make sure to check out the link in my description box. And if you're watching all the way until the end of the video, that means so much to me, and it helps me a lot with the YouTube algorithm. So thank you, thank you, thank you.